All right, we're coming to you live from Kane County. I'm Marcus Benjamin, and he's Frank Tucker, our recruiting analyst here for Rivals.com, Miami.rivals.com. And this is the first edition of this podcast. And we're just going to give you our thoughts of what's going on with Miami recruiting. Obviously, there's a lot going on this week, Frank. We've had Nathaniel Joseph commit to Miami. We've also had Robert Stafford out of Uigali commit to Miami as well. So first and foremost, I wanted to get your thoughts on Ray Ray's commitment and what that means for the Miami Hurricanes 2023 recruiting class.
It gives Miami a signature recruit in the South Florida area on top of Robbie and Bobby Washington. I mean, if you look at the offensive recruiting base that we have right now with Rashada, Nathaniel Joseph, Robbie Washington, and Antonio Tripp, you have, and as well as the two tight ends that we do have committed, you have the base of a strong recruiting class going forward. I mean, we just jump up into the top 25 of the Rivals team recruiting rankings, and they only have 10 recruits, right? So on average, they're already at the 13th best spot in the country for average of recruiting. We didn't get our first 4-star recruit until we got Jaden Rashada in the fold. So Rashada, Robbie Washington, and obviously Robert Stafford now give us 3 blue chip prospects. So those are obviously substantial gets for Mario Cristobal and staff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is kind of a commitment that we kind of all knew that was coming. And Ray, as soon as he decommitted from Clemson, there was rumblings everywhere that Ray was coming home, and it was just between Louisville and Miami, really, for his pledge to his college destination. And I don't. It comes as no surprise to me that Ray stays home. And I spoke to Coach Gaddis a few weeks back, and he wanted to make sure that there was an increase in speed or team speed overall. And you don't get any better than Nathaniel Joseph. To me, he is aside from Brandon Ennis, the most explosive player in South Florida. So just if you could just touch on just dynamically what he does to a football team.
Yeah, I mean, over the course of the offseason, just talking to college coaches, I think the 2 biggest slot receiver recruits in the country were Zachariah Branch out of Las Vegas, Bishop Gorman, and Nathaniel Ray Joseph. When you get a kid who is, considered one of the top players in the country at their position, obviously it's a big get. The kid has an impact in the return game on top of being an explosive slot receiver that you've described. But we've also seen his ability as a defender as well. So we've seen that not only is he a fast kid, he's an aggressive kid with, the versatility to play, a number of different positions, fill a number of different roles. I know he was on a space talking about, his expectations coming in were he's going to be a special teams contributor, not just as a returner, but as a guy running down on kickoff. So this kid's a football player in every sense of the word. He's a grinder. He's also a 3.75 GPA kid, I believe. So you're getting a kid who's going to excel in the classroom on top of being able to learn his playbook at a pace that will get him on the field much earlier than expected. And I think right now, Miami has a lot of talent in the receiver room, but I don't think you have as many receivers in the room that are as well-rounded and as notable as a Nathaniel Ray Joseph. I mean, we were able to snag Romello Brinson, in a COVID year, and obviously big recruit. But when was the last time we've really been able to grab a kid who's a top 100 recruit from a home base like South Florida and put him into the fold along with a blue chip quarterback? It's a beautiful time to be a Miami Hurricanes fan and to be a fan of just recruiting in general. It's exciting to see the potential of the connection of Jaden Rashada and Nathaniel Ray Joseph on their vertical potential.
Yeah, absolutely. And pair him with Robbie Washington, that essentially is in this class as well, is something that Hurricanes fans can definitely get excited about. I mean, you talked about his GPA. He also has, bloodlines as well. We all down here, we all remember Flex Joseph, is a cousin of Ray, and Nathaniel Joseph to the U is something that uh, all Hurricanes fans wanted to see, now will see, and he's going to be locked in for the entire time. And I don't think there's any fear of Ray decommitting from the U. Definitely one of the best athletes in South Florida, and he's a gamer. He's a dog. He fights for extra yards. He's a master at the yak, the yards after catch. I mean, he's got thighs like tree trunks. I mean, it doesn't take one or two. It takes one or two players to bring him down, because he's that much of a player. He's an exciting player, and you talked about him getting on the field early. I think he's a player who can be in the return game like immediately, because if I'll ask you, Frank, if you put him on the team right now, the current roster right now, who do you think would beat him out as far as being a kick returner? The only one you could possibly say is a Jacoby George or maybe Xavier Restrepo. What are your thoughts?
I think he's in the return game. He's really similar to like a Brashard Smith, just based on explosiveness. Obviously, Restrepo and Jacoby have a smoothness to them. Their ability to find the small creases in space that not everybody does. But just in regards to explosiveness in the return game that we've seen, in the South Florida landscape, those two kids, are two of those special type players that they can take the ball, 60 to 80 on any time they touch it. So, I think honestly, like we said, it's easy to expect an early impact from Nathaniel Ray Joseph, just because we haven't had a lot of special team success over the years. I mean, we haven't had a great returner in a while. Braxton Berrios was that guy that, he was an all-conference type guy, but wasn't an explosive guy by any stretch of the imagination. He was a consistent guy that, fielded punts really well. But, we've had some struggles at that position for a long time. I mean, we saw Mark Pope not be able to handle it. We saw, a lot of guys just on a weekly basis trying to put it in. And Jalen Knighton's a great running back, but, I don't know if he really fills that role as a returner as good as someone that might not be a starter at receiver right now and might not just be able to focus on that returner position. And listen, we've seen how much the special teams can affect Miami football. We've lost games because of lack of production in special teams. So, I think right now he immediately becomes, a contender for both the punt returner and kick returner spots. And I also think he immediately becomes a rotation guy at the slot, one of those slot receiver positions. I mean, the game has changed completely to where you have to run 4 wide receiver sets almost all the time. So, I think he contends for one of those slot receiver spots almost immediately. And I'm excited to see, how he fits in with that Coach Gaddis offense starting next year.
Agreed. It'll definitely be exciting to see if he gets on the field year one. We'll see. Also committing this week is Robert Stafford, very dynamic athlete out of Brevard County. This is a guy who started out at receiver and is making the switch to defensive back. He's just an uber talented athlete. I mean, I watched his tape and he can pretty much do it all. And I love the receiver changing to defensive back type of player, because there's an adage that a guy's playing defensive back because he can't catch. Well, this is a guy who can catch, and he's going to be playing defensive back. So he was hesitant on making the change at first, as all wide receivers do, because wide receivers kind of the glory position. You get to score touchdowns, but I think more exciting is getting that pick six or getting that interception. or causing a turnover on downs. So, what do you like from this kid Stafford?
Yeah, so I mean, if you turn on the tape, he has about a 7 minute long junior highlight tape, combine both sides of the ball. And obviously, the first love of this kid is the receiver position. He's got 4 or 5 minutes of tape just on the offensive side of the ball. But if you watch the defensive film, which is about 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, he's a natural at the cornerback position. You're able to see him, both on the boundary and the field. And the first thing you see that you recognize is his length. 6'1", 6'2", long arms. And that thing that really makes him special is that with that length, he has a smoothness coming out of his back pedal, a smoothness coming out of his break that not a lot of guys that are not natural defensive backs, guys who haven't played the position for a long time, they don't usually have, right? And another thing that I loved about him, and you always see when a receiver transitions to the defensive side of the ball, the expectation is turnovers, right? Just because of ball skills, they have that ability to go up and get it a little bit better than a kid who's played defense back his whole life. The kid is able to high point the ball with one hand and get a ton of PBUs. He's not overly aggressive to where he's going to be beat vertically, on missing INTs. He's a kid that he finds the ball in the air, which is a skill, ball skill wise, that not everybody is able to recognize, and he's a natural at the cornerback position. And I think a thing that he brings to the table that Miami doesn't necessarily have right now is somebody that after the turnover is able to make a play. He didn't have a ton of picks last year, but when you did see him get the ball in his hands on the defensive side of the ball, he made huge plays. He's making people miss. He's breaking tackles. He is a smooth athlete, and that's the easiest way to describe him. I love to see a kid, like you said, who's able to transition from offense to defense because the ceiling is usually higher. But if you cut on the film, especially with a kid with not a ton of experience on the defensive side of the ball, you can't only be excited, and I think he's a welcome addition. And I don't think he's as expected of an addition as a Jaden Rashada and a Nathaniel or Joseph, just because he hasn't been talked about as much amongst the core group of fans than those guys. But I think you got to be just as excited about him, especially because we don't have a ton of corners on the roster right now that are NFL caliber guys. That he's a big get. He's a big get.
Yeah, I think he sets the tone for the class with this first DB that you add to the 2023 class. I mean, just super athletic type of player. He has a significant high jump, and he also played basketball, I believe. So he's just a really athletic player, and he, like I said, he kind of sets the tone for that position. But now that he has pledged to the Hurricanes for the 2023 class, I did want to ask, what are some of the guys that you think that can also be added to the defensive backfield position that you've seen that can be added and paired and just join Robert Stafford?
Yeah, and like I said, we don't have a ton of corners on the roster right now that are NFL guys, so I think that Miami's definitely going to be targeting at least two more. And I think you dip into that South Florida Express talent pool that is this elite 2023 class, and you go and try to get Cormany Mclean out of Lakeland and Damari Brown from American Heritage. Those are two blue chip prospects. Cormany Mclean is the number one corner in the country and in the conversation for number one player overall in the class. That those would be two huge gets and two guys that, while you do bring in a guy like Robert Stafford, who could be a little bit of a project just in terms of his transition to the position, that these two guys could be two impact guys right off the bat at the cornerback position. You lose Tyreek Stevenson into Corey Couch, I believe, this year. So, there's going to be, opportunities available for young guys to come in and showcase their abilities. And these are two guys that I think would be huge gets, probably two of our biggest cornerback commits since like a Tracy Howard or somebody along those lines. So I think that those would probably be the two biggest targets at the defensive back position, for Miami. And then you got Jonel Alguero, who's, a St. John's, Massachusetts safety, 5-star kid that's been tweeting at Cormany Mclean and seeing what he wants to do. When you start to get kids like Jaden Rashada and Ray Joseph, those blue chip prospects start talking, and he's one of those kids that we don't typically go into Massachusetts and grab blue chip kids in that area, but if you're able to grab a kid like that at the safety position and continue to add depth and bolster talent at safety when you got, Avante Williams and Cam Kinchins and, James Williams obviously might, be that hybrid type guy. But if you continue to add safety talent, you're going to be good at defensive back because that only helps those corners that could be Cormany Mclean, Damari Brown, and Robert Stafford.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with all of those guys that you mentioned. Cormani, definitely, every bit of a 5-star that he is rated. But some other guys that I thought of that, potentially can add to this defensive back group is a Jaden Bonsu, who also from the Northeast as well. Miami definitely is starting to tap into the Northeast. Maybe it started with Tyler Van Dyke because he's, out of the New England area that, we're starting to get guys from that area. Jaden Bonsu has Miami in his top school list and is due to commit in August. I think he's an uber talented player. Another player that it really came on my radar during the Legends camp is Kenton Kirkland. He's a player out of Rains High School up in Jacksonville. Just looks the part. Every time I saw him perform, during the camp, I was impressed with him. I just thought he could be a really valuable addition to the Hurricanes 2023 class. He's got some ties down here in South Florida. And I spoke to his dad, and his dad is, hoping that a Miami offer comes to fruition, which I anticipate it will. And so that's a name to kind of really look out for is Kenton Kirkland. Some other names are that, just to kind of keep your eye on is, I know he's committed to Nebraska, but he's over there at Miami Palmetto, and that's Dwight Boodle. I mean, that's a player. He's over there at Palmetto with the Washington Twins. I could see them, maybe trying to convince him to, flip his commitment from Nebraska to Miami. That's a guy who I like a lot. And then a couple other names are D'Angelo Pons could be a possibility. And Harlem Howard is a player that I like a lot as well out of Blanche Ely, safety, really athletic. I think that's a player to watch out for.
And then 9 interceptions last year as a junior. And another kid that's he's transitioned from being a basketball player. If you watch him on the hardwood, he shows all the intangibles to be a really good, safety at the next level, free safety. He's not a guy that's, totally going to be taking people's heads off, but obviously the ball skills are there. He plays for the DEFCON 7-on-7 program, so he's been on a national stage, in the off season. He's at Blanche Ely right now. He was at Deerfield Beach last year, so he's got the pedigree from coming over from an elite program. And I totally agree with you on D'Angelo Pons. I wish, Miami would pull the trigger on a smaller guy like that. He fits that to Corey Couch mold in a lot of ways. 10.65 speed. He doesn't have elite stats, but that's, a defensive back. I think sometimes if you don't have elite stats, sometimes you got to look a little bit deeper into that. And the reason is because he's so good in coverage. This offseason, he was easily the best defensive back for the DEFCON 7-on-7 program. He's a state champion. And if you ask some people, you could argue that he was maybe the best defensive back in that Chaminade Madonna defensive backfield last year that had Ryan Turner, who was an Ohio State signee, Brian Dilworth, who was a Kansas signee, and then they had Jeremiah McGill, who went to UConn. So, or UMass, so they had Division I kids all over that defensive back group, and he stood out amongst everybody.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the last one I had could be could be a long shot because I know Ohio State is definitely on this kid, and he's in that defensive backfield with Damari Brown, but Damon Fagan. Damon Fagan is a guy that very rangy. He's got good vision. He closes in on the football well. Play another one of those SFE kids that just dominated, and he's a player who shows up in games, not a player who disappears at all. So I did get to speak to him while I was in Vegas for the OT7. Did say that Miami is still on the radar. I didn't get a lot of confidence from him about Miami, but things can change over the course of a few months, and especially with the momentum that Miami has now, anything is possible, really. So Damon Fagan was my last one that that can be added to that defensive backfield. That would be a really great get for Miami.
Yeah, and if anybody doesn't know, Damon Fagan's a 6'4" free safety, with ball skills like a receiver. I remember the first time I got a chance to see him play was his sophomore year, COVID year, actually. They were playing American Heritage at Chaminade Madonna, and he made a play to run down Thad Franklin at the end of the game to actually win the game.
Yeah,
And that was a huge moment. That was a huge moment for him. And after that, he kind of blew up. But I think that he's a kid that when you're looking at a ball hawking type free safety kid with elite range. I mean, when you're 6'4", he's built out differently than a 6'4", 6'5" James Williams, right? He's definitely a safety. He's not a kid that's going to transition to play at the second or first level of the defense. He's a kid that is a true defensive back. But he's a kid that I would as a Miami Hurricanes fan, I would hate to see play for an NC State or an Ohio State because I think he goes to Ohio State, maybe doesn't play right away, but ends up being an NFL guy. And I think he goes to NC State and could end up hurting the Hurricanes in some way, shape, or form whenever they're on the schedule, because he's a kid that is a dog. You watch him in Vegas. He had several big plays in that tournament. It's 7-on-7. You get tested vertically all the time, and he was making plays, showing confidence, was talking a little bit of smack here and there.
He was.
And when you see a kid that has that swagger, that's the type of kid that you want to bring into Miami. And I think if you're able to bring in that core group of American Heritage kids, maybe you're able to finagle Brandon Harris out of that Ohio State commitment in some way, shape, or form. Obviously, that's a tall tale. That's a wish list type thing, but you want to try to build as many relationships at premier schools like American Heritage as possible, and getting a Damon Fagan and Damari Brown. Those would be steps in that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of put a bow on things, what are some of the since we talked about the defensive backs that we feel like should join Stafford, what quickly in like 5 minutes, what are some of the wide receivers that you think can join Ray and Robbie, of course, to be an elite group?
Yeah, I think you continue to dip into that South Florida pool of talent. You try to go after Jaylen Brown as one of the top 5 receivers in the country. Continue to add speed. Coach Gaddis has talked about that, consistently this offseason, adding speed. Somebody told me that the SEC stands for speed eliminates competition. And and the more speed you're able to add to your team, you can. That's something you can't coach. So when you got a kid like Jaylen Brown, you got a kid like Nathaniel Ray Joseph, you're taking away certain coverages from defenses. You're taking away opportunities for teams to bring added pressures, because if you're bringing somebody from the defensive backfield or somebody from the second level that's taking them out of coverage, you're hurting that team. But Hakeem Williams is another name. He's looking more like a Pitt or Bama type lean. Will Fowles is a kid that not everybody knows about out of Dade Christian, but 6'3", 205, 210 pounds. He's a man child. Hasn't played an elite level of competition, but Kid had 19 touchdowns last year as a junior. And if you cut on the tape, you see all 19 touchdowns. Yeah, there's no lying about those stats. The kid has been dominant all types of settings. Plays for Florida Fire 7-on-7 program as their premier player. Andy Jean is a kid that was once committed to Miami. I'm thinking he's more of a Texas A&M lean right now, and might be a harder get, but he would be that possession receiver in the class, more of your prototypical route runner, possession type guy. That would be a nice combination with guys like a Jaylen Brown or a Ray Joseph. And then the kid that's the biggest X factor for me, because he has so many positions that he could play, is Chris Johnson out of Dillard. I think he probably transitions to the receiver position, and at the Legends camp, he got a chance to see his vertical ability against some DBs down there, and the state champion in the 100 and 200 meter, one of the fastest kids in the country overall, and the pedigree his dad played at Oregon State. You got to try to bring a kid like that, because if you're able to, similar to American Heritage, trying to build that pipeline, you're able to get into Dillard and build that pipeline. You get Antoine Jackson potentially in the 2024 class. They have 3 Power 5 defensive linemen in the 2025 class. They have several kids that are going to be Miami targets moving forward. And if you're able to grab a Chris Johnson, who is a leader on that team, and a kid that is a Dillard kid at heart all the way through, you really improve your team's chances at recruiting that school over the next few years.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't even really think about him transitioning to wide receiver. That's actually a really good thought, and that'll get a lot of people's wheels turning. I had a chance to speak to him today, and he is, just warming up, and he was warming up with the track team first. And he is every bit as fast. I mean, that kid is just blazing fast, and he's so fast that you really can't see how great he is as a running back, because no one can catch him. And like, can he break tackles? I don't know. No one has really gotten that close to do so. So he's that type of player and that type of talent. Totally agree about the Dillard pipeline, because they got tons of kids over there from the offensive line, defensive line, and you talked about Antoine Jackson as well. I mean, Dillard is going to be loaded for the next few years, because most of those kids are 24 and 25 guys, and Chris Johnson is a must get. And I think I'd be surprised if he didn't end up with Miami, because Miami seems like the ideal place for him. The only other running back Miami is really looking at, I think, is Cedric Baxter at this point. So they usually do take 2 running backs in each class, and I think you get the power and explosiveness with Baxter, and then you got the straight line speed with Johnson. So yeah, I really think that addition would do wonders for the 2023 class. So we're going to just go ahead and wrap up this first episode of the Canes County Live podcast. We're going to continue this podcast intermittently throughout the week as news comes up. But this is going to wrap up the first episode of the Canes County podcast. Till the next episode.